Genetics of metabolism are not static. You do have a uniqueness to the way you burn calories from food and metabolize carbs, fats, even proteins. Weight loss for women over 40 can be suddenly tricky. Today, we're going to discuss the importance of genetics of metabolism so that you don't just have to look at what is, but that you can change the expression of your genetics and optimize your habits for your optimal health. If you've wondered, why can't I? Or why doesn't it work for me, but it works for her? Then close your other distractions, close your browsers, and tune in. But first, this. Before I introduce my guest on this episode, I want to bring up something integral in many of the guest experts that I have in this podcast. Think for a moment about the physicians and care providers you've had over the course of your adult life. When you had a health concern or issue, and by the way, I include weight loss resistance under health concerns, though sometimes it's treated with an eat this, eat less, exercise more advice, we know enough over the last decade. I hope I've shed some light on the fact that you can, 1, think you're doing the right thing, and 2, truly be doing the right thing and still have no one actually look at your genetics, your hormone levels, and the integration of that together with your dietary or exercise needs. Why? I believe there are different ways experts become experts. 1, they've been through what you're going through. 2, they've helped thousands of others with a method that consistently gets results. And or 3, and this is gold, they can say both and have the education, of course, to back it up. A young or experienced male physician, a young female physician, or exercise expert for that matter, who has not yet had the life experience simply has a gap. It's not impossible, but that combination of having been there together with the method and the knowledge is gold. And that is really where we're going today. I'm Deborah Atkinson. You're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top struggles and concerns, but most of all, we hope to inspire you with the way we talk about them and the solutions to them, so that you can have the energy and the vitality that you want, need, and deserve in the second and better half. And my guest today is Dr. Reika Milanovic Gallbraith. And Dr. Reika has been successfully leading families to optimal health for over 2 decades as a board-certified family medicine doctor, from delivering babies to managing family care in the clinic and hospital. She is now exclusively a leading functional medicine consultant certified by the Institute for Functional Medicine. She's an international speaker, facilitator, and mentor to practitioners, and has trained dozens of practitioners one-on-one via her online mentorship, and more recently as a mentor for IFM, or the Institute of Functional Medicine mentioned previously. Dr. Reika's patients travel from around the world due to her renowned expertise as an autoimmune disease expert, autism, nutrigenics and methylation, digestive disorders, cognitive decline, mold toxicity, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, simply because of that, an incredible track record. For over 2 decades, Dr. Reika has helped women lose weight. She's perfected the She Reset that has enabled hundreds of women to shed that stubborn weight for good. Having overcome 2 autoimmune diseases along with stubborn perimenopausal weight gives her firsthand knowledge and empathy for the challenges her clients face. In this episode, you will hear after we've talked carbohydrates, we've talked fat, I ask a little about protein, and we get into a little bit of protein need. And I want you to be clear that I don't believe Dr. Reika's answer is elusive, but we're not coming from the same place. So, from contemporary intake, many of you have heard me say this, based on research of Dr. Donald Lehman is one of those whose names will appear on the primary research again and again in relationship to avoiding frailty, promoting longevity and strength. And the key being, we're not waiting until either we have a fracture or bone density issue to start working on our bones, right? Similarly with muscle, we're now believing that we don't wait until we have muscle loss to the extent we're trying to stop it and just stop from getting more frail, but that we're preventing it by gaining lean muscle by increasing our protein now. And that is the difference between recommendations and guidelines that you're going to hear listed here, as well as my asking her, because what I wanted to know is if she's recommending that also to her patients. At this time, she's not, but that's at the time of the recording. Tune in later for what happens after this. Let's dive into this episode. Dr. Reika, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Okay, so first of all, everybody loves a juicy story. And we just kind of hinted at the fact that you're not only the doctor, but you have been kind of walking the path and you get it. You get them. Tell us a little bit about your personal journey.
Yeah. So, when I came out in medicine, I was very altruistic and I just wanted to heal everyone. And very quickly I found that I wasn't really healing or helping anyone. I said, there's something missing. And ironically, so I was always searching, what's going on. And one of the common symptoms was fatigue that came across my doors. And I had no idea that this would become kind of my life story. And I was really, really fatigued. I almost quit in residency and almost never lived out my 3 dreams, which was I had a dream to become a doctor, I had a dream to get married and have kids, and I had a dream to open my own practice, and could never really figure out why did I need more sleep than everyone, and et cetera, et cetera. And so fast forward, I was able to finally get this diagnosis of Hashimoto's, and it was interesting. The endocrinologist at the time said the weight gain with Hashimoto's, just because I put you on meds, won't come off. You have to be really mindful. And he was exactly right. And so that was one piece I have quite the weight loss journey too. And so I've been able to maintain weight, but like women fluctuated, and we'll talk about that. And I ended up developing pretty much everything you can think of. So I just conquered the fatigue. Then it was infertility, enough to break my heart, where it was years of infertility and treatment. And it wasn't until I took a natural approach, it just went on and on to vision, losing migraines. And it culminated where one day I felt so bad, and I was going into liver insufficiency. So it wasn't really failure, but it was headed that way. And I felt so, so terrible. And they were entertaining a second autoimmune disease. So I found, ironically, a functional medicine doctor who helped me through that. And I recovered myself, never got the diagnosis of autoimmune hepatitis, which was what they thought. The stats on that are terrible, that if you're not on cortisol or cortisone after the diagnosis, the rate of dying is 30 to 50% in 5 years. So I had a high chance that I wouldn't make it if I wasn't on cortisone or prednisone. And I ended up reversing all those terrible numbers, never got put on prednisone, and I haven't died. It was that was back in 2013, so that was 9 years ago. But what's interesting, so I finally started to be able to heal people, and what I realized was I get 80% better, 80% of the patients better. And then I kept diving down the rabbit hole and did this whole foray in nutritional genomics, and then I was able to get closer to 100%. Now, there are some people who are so far gone you can't get, but it really helped me understand, and I could reverse engineer it. So I learned how to determine what was going on genetically without even having to use the genes. And at one point I even got an autism reversal. We can't say cure, but just astounding when the young man popped on the Zoom screen and had a meaningful conversation with me. I started to cry. And then before his next visit, he told his mom, is Dr. Reika going to cry again? Like, he was so sensitive to that. Well, I just couldn't believe it, because all the meetings were with his mom because he was in school and she's giving me the updates. And I'd seen him so many times in office and so that was one thing. And then how this relates to kind of the whole, what do we do when it applies to not normal, but like conditions that aren't so serious, like I was even reversing memory loss. Back in the 90s, when I was in residency, I took a job in a weight loss clinic, and we did everything wrong. We prescribed medications, fen-phen, and we even had a study doing fen-phen and Prozac. And one of those drugs was yanked off the market. We had to counsel them and say it could lead to high pressures in the lung that led to lung failure. I mean, who would take that risk? And I also had my own weight gain and loss journey. It felt like with every change in life, freshman 15, third year medical school, first year of residency. So I gained it, lost it, gained it, lost it. Every vacation, if I didn't run 5 miles, could you imagine, like, what is a vacation? Why should I have to run 5 miles a day? Not through the whole vacation, but daily. So I wouldn't gain 5 pounds. And then I was able to stabilize it a little bit, or mostly, with the traditional functional medicine approach until I hit 48. And then I just packed on like 19 pounds. And I thought, I didn't do anything different. And all of a sudden, I was just like all of the other patients that came to see me that hit perimenopause and menopause. And I'm sure you've heard this story before. And it took knowing
once or twice. Yeah.
Once or twice. And I thought, they're right. I haven't changed anything. They didn't change anything. And, before, when I was in traditional medicine, I said, oh, sure, let's, do a diet intake and see what you're doing. And so I started applying some of these, genetic principles to me, and I was able to craft a plan. So I did run my genetics as it applies to everything, including weight loss. I determined why I got so sick. So I was able to not only, continue to stave off any other serious illness, but I was able to craft a plan that worked for me, and then I could just duplicate it. And I did. Now I'm not even running the genetics on people. So I'm able to create a program that is sustainable, that gets the weight gone, and then keeps it gone, because we leverage what we learn in the program so they can pretty much determine how to eat for them. And what I'll end with is, and all of this, my eyes went bing, bing, bing. Well, no wonder there's no one diet that fits all.
Truth. Okay. So with that, every listener, self-included, right? We've tried things. We've tried lots of things. And I will say this, for as many that as I've tried, I mean, that's threefold for my mom's generation. I can list all the ones that she went through that I watched, and she wasn't what I would say ultra conscious, and so I think, wow, what we've witnessed, in our time, what we witnessed and had as our model, what's missing? So clearly, the weight loss industry and diets are a big deal, but what's missing? What are the real missing components in most weight loss programs?
Well, I think so. We'll give you the list and we can go through them. I do think taking into account the individual genes, and that can govern lots of things, and we can break that down a little further, is first and foremost. And second is giving people an approach that is not only doable during loss, but then teaching them how to eat. So this is why I'm not a big fan of these pre-prepared meals, because then the minute you stop getting them, like, the Jenny Craig's or whatever else out there, then they regain it because they don't know how to eat. the third would be, not having that supportive environment. We found that most people, the weight loss is greater and more sustained when you are supported. And so I've added that in. And I'll add a little bonus one is there's this new thing that I don't think anyone else is, besides the genetics, anyone else is talking about. And it's something called short chain fatty acids. And hopefully we'll have time to get to that one, and why the lowering of them really can inhibit weight loss. We can talk about some strategies to help support the number of short chain fatty acids our body produces. But yeah, so genes, and then so it's not a one size fits all. Not teaching people how to, what to do when they want to lose and what to do when they maintain. I think that maintenance piece is really missing. And that's where the gold is. I think it's even more important. And that's where I think the genes come into play than the weight loss phase. And then this concept of lowered short chain fatty acids shoots people in the foot. And a lot of diets are preaching things that lead to the lowering of them inadvertently.
That is such a rich tease. Okay, listeners, you have been challenged. You must now stay to the end for that juicy little bit about short chain fatty acids. But what I want you to make sure that you heard, if you're leaving early, that it's reducing them that is the problem. All right. So let's come back, though, to what was it about genetics that you discovered that was so game-changing for you?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about kind of the top 3 or 4. The first one, probably most of your listeners were able to figure out, probably by now if they've been on program after program, but it relates to the way we break down carbohydrates. And there's actually a gene called the Amy1 gene. I said, darn Amy, she's not letting us lose weight. The bad friend who
bitch.
Yeah, I know that bitch. She entices us to eat that cupcake. But so this is the one I learned quickly. So it's not as hard to figure out, but it can be. And what we found in maintenance, there are certain carbs, even that carry the same glycemic index or load, that are more inflammatory than others. So you could say, but it's the same sugar load. Why is this one causing more of an inflammatory response? And so that's something the listeners probably aren't as in tune to. And so we teach that in the maintenance phase to be very cognizant of which foods work for them. And that's why I don't, there's probably one diet that's probably okay for most people, but everyone, keto's all the rage, but it's probably only appropriate for about 20% of the population out there. And we'll segue into the next gene and I'll tell you why.
Okay. I love this. And I want to go back, as you mentioned maintenance again, that word triggered a thought that I had as you were talking about how that is such a missing piece. And I totally agree, whether it's prepackaged or even delivered meals sent to your house. I mean, if you're going to do that for the rest of your life, that's something. But I think it's really hard not to learn how to cook, just basic skills. We need to be teaching those better. But much like not teaching maintenance in, terms of most diets, it's a lot like in exercise programs. The one thing not included is what will you do when you have obstacles, when you can't do the workout, when you can't do the plan A, the best, the ideal schedule. What will you do then? So very similar, just two big missing gaps. Okay, so that's obviously, I'm guessing we're going to hit some of the other food stuff. So what about fat metabolism?
Yeah, this is a piece that I didn't really understand just by playing around with my diet. And so there's a variety of genes that govern fat metabolism. So, but the one for saturated fats, so those are we think of as good, right? The avocados, the olive oil. The gene is actually called, just for listeners who want to know, but it's kind of a geek out thing, is ApoA2 is the name of the gene. And it governs how we break down these good fats. And if for some people, ingesting too many good fats will, make them not be able to lose weight. And I had no idea this is what was affecting me. And so here I am having that big breakfast, the the eggs and the avocado and a little side salad with some olive oil poured on top of it. And I'm eating really healthy, but not so. And so that's where in the maintenance phase where we determine, do you have this gene or not? And we're able to guide people through the exact right amount. And actually in the losing phase, we do something that's kind of unique to kind of test the strategy. And we guide people. And one of the things that you just said was like this whole misnomer, what will you do when you have an obstacle? And we do, support, and that group community is missing in not all, but some programs. And we actually teach at all junctures, like, what do you do when you're traveling on a road trip? What do you do when you're in a pinch and there's nothing to eat? And thankfully these days we've got Instacart and we've got all these delivery services that'll be at your door unless you're in some remote location. And we even teach to that. So we're constantly educating. So, and believe it or not, I had one woman that recently completed my program, and she lost, typical is 20 to 25 pounds in 6 weeks. She lost 30 pounds and she hadn't eaten a single vegetable pretty much most of her adult life. And she hates to cook. And we got her there. And it was the inspiration of not only the recipes we provided, but all the recipes and ideas. And then, my job is to have them change that languaging from I hate vegetables to I'm learning to enjoy vegetables. I'm using herbs and spices to may have variety and have them tasty. And so, and I had to do a whole, and so this is what a good leader does. In any program, you can, if the leader should sense, hey, is the morale getting down low? And I'm like, hey, there's a lot of people, because it's a ladder, you're going to have, it's kind of with loss, you'll lose, and then maybe a little plateau, lose and plateau, but the general trend is going to be a decline, right? And so I got on and I did a whole Facebook Live. I said, okay, we got to change the dialogue, because if you change your words, you'll change your life. And everyone for days was like, wow, that was amazing. I'm so glad you said, you came on and said that. Now it has me rethinking when I'm down in the dumps about thinking about preparing meals or not wanting, like this one woman not wanting to eat vegetables. And in her case, I do have an interesting thing to say, is that she was put on a medication for hypersomnia, which is where they sleep a lot. I think she was wrongly diagnosed because her energy just soared on the plan, and she's gotten off her afternoon dose to keep. So think of, she's probably on some prescriptive stimulant. And like, that's terrible. Like, why can't we use our diets to fuel our bodies? But she's seen so much change. And within the program, we also teach all the other things they need to be doing to keep themselves healthy. So yeah, but that's a blip on the fat gene. And I did discover a new one that I don't test for, but just so listeners will know why some of us in menopause will gain weight. There's a gene called PPARG. And if you don't, the more, if you have a mutation in that gene, women will typically have the skinny arms and legs and less fat in their bums. And then postmenopausally, those are the women who gain more weight. Sadly, I don't think that affects me. I've been an athlete, so maybe being a runner masks that. But so that wasn't my reason or excuse. But just know that you can override the genes, and we call that epigenetics. And that's what I've created the program to do, to override any genes, so you don't even have to know. Is that you're eating to a very specific way that induces weight loss in all, and then when you're reintroducing to a way that maintains it for you.
Perfect. Okay, so we've talked carbohydrates, we've talked fat, so talk just a little bit to protein, and is that by default, because maybe you're adjusting your carbs or your fats up or down depending on your genes? Is that just one that we leave out, or how does that work?
The proteins. So I didn't find any specific genes, but they're same thing if you're overindulging. But unfortunately, the majority of society is probably protein malnourished.
Say that again. Excuse me. Say that again, please.
The majority of society is likely protein malnourished.
In your estimation, Dr. Reika, this is a point we definitely need to make. for women who are probably strongly our listener audience in their 50s and 60s and raised in a different era, when you see clients come in that demographic, is that even more true maybe than a young woman in her 30s?
Absolutely. And we talk about strategies. So, and I'll calculate so if they're seeing me one-on-one, we calculate their needs. The beauty of the program is they're kind of built in. So at 40, we all lose muscle mass, and you're the queen, I'm sure, Deborah, of having them add in strength training, because that's number one. Number two, or equally as important, is having enough protein in the intake. So this is just an approximation. Don't utilize this without talking to your doctor or your healthcare provider. But say you're not losing muscle mass, it's about a gram per kilogram. So the 60-kilogram woman who's not losing muscle mass will need 60 grams of protein spread through the day. That's just an average.
Okay. Yeah. And let me interrupt, because we've been using science based on body weight, ideal lean body weight, and that in pounds in grams of protein for longevity, avoiding frailty, sarcopenia. So your take on that?
Take on that. And then one thing I'm just starting to add is to do a DEXA scan to identify those that are approaching sarcopenia. And so it's actually, some of the women are younger than we typically think of someone 65 and older having that. And then those are the ones that you have to say, all right, how much protein do you actually need? And that could be much higher than that 1 gram per kilogram per day.
Yes. So do you advocate? Are you behind the science that's suggesting that higher level of protein?
Adequate, but yeah, higher for sarcopenia. But there was a review study that said it's not just protein, it's also, they added in vitamin D. So I'm not certain why that was added in, but
fast twitch muscle fiber, because it's key in maintaining fast twitch muscle fiber or gaining it. And that's true for young kids who want to play football. I mean, that's true for all of us, but also vitamin D is so key for metabolism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you got to look at, so I think with that in mind, typically, whether I work in a group or one program, I'm advocating for much more than just a solid eating plan. And we have them do things in the office one way, and we're measuring, and then out of the office, we can make general recommendations. So they do keep their D levels up. And so they're tracking these things. So, general rule of thumb, I've even revamped what I'm doing. And when we get to that short chain fatty acid piece, is I have a task method for just general healthy eating that kind of really evaluates some of the things that are being done wrong, when it's not even weight loss that is what is needed.
Yeah, there's a good point. Okay, so as we're talking about weight loss and about energy needs, I think the conversation always, and especially for our listeners, so again, raised as young adults, impressionable adults with a certain mindset, potentially. So if you're coming in, I'm always so concerned, if you're coming in right now and you hear me say this, I want you to know what I'm about to say is not what is true, right? But a lot of people will still be under the belief that we are calories in, calories out. Not necessarily true, but resting metabolic rate and activity, energy expenditure. I mean, the both of them come into play. So there is a piece of that. And then there's a piece of how what you eat and how you exercise affects your hormones. Talk a little bit about the genetics of resting metabolic rate.
Yep, this is another one that got me in trouble, Deborah.
Really?
Yes. So, and I'll tell you the story is, so there's a gene called UCP1, and that's not important to remember. You can just call it the burn gene or the resting metabolic rate gene. And so that's for a refresh for your audience that probably knows this, because you're such a good educator, is that's how many calories you burn at rest. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. It is never calories in, calories out. I think that may work when you're younger, like under the age of 18 or even in early 20s, but eventually there's so many other factors. And so what happens is, if you have a mutation, you override it by exercise. But guess what happens if you don't exercise? that weight just comes back on. And so probably,
Maybe I should have you say that again.
okay. So let me say that again. So the bernzine, remembered, it controls your resting metabolic rate. It's called UCP1. Is that you can override a low resting metabolic rate by adding in exercise. But guess what happens if you're exercising to a certain degree and all of a sudden, particularly as you hit perimenopause and menopause, the weight's going to come back on because you have not overridden it with your epigenetics, which is what we call our lifestyle. So exercise still is key.
Yay. Okay. There we go. Mic drop. Okay. I always like one, at least one. Actually, I think you've had a couple. Okay. So we're about there. I think we can get close to, I know you're chomping at the bit to talk short chain fatty acids, but if we could give, and maybe you want to lump this in, like top tips and takeaways for listeners, because we've hit on so many good things about the genetics of their metabolism. What would you want them to walk away with, pun intended, because many of them are walking while listening?
Yeah. So as it goes to the genetics, say someone's struggling, is pay close attention to the carbs. They're probably doing that, and play with the amount. And then and I'm going to say, play with all of these. And then when you can't figure it out, don't let it go too long. Because what I see is people have tried way too long and they don't get a guide involved. And then years have gone by, and then whatever's happening to them as a result of either the weight they can't lose weight or the symptoms they have, they're so far gone, they're harder to reverse, including when they go to full-blown diabetes, so much harder than when they're pre-diabetes. So play with the carbs and the saturated fats, see how you do on your own, get the right guide, ensure you're doing the right kind of exercise. And I'm sure, Deborah, you preach about this, not only for your resting metabolic rate, but do the right kind being not long hours of cardio, the great cardio, which is the high intensity or HIIT workouts. And, obviously don't hurt yourself when you're doing it if you're doing high impact, and add in that strength training. And then as far as if we could just introduce briefly this concept of short chain fatty acids and this is where another piece I think that is so wrong in the industry. In a nutshell, short chain fatty acids are fuel that your bacteria in your large intestine, which make up your microbiome, release. So they chew up the foods you eat and release short chain fatty acids. And you can have an abundance of them the more abundant food you eat. So a diet that's not restricted, a diet where you rotate your food every 24 hours. So you're not eating the same thing every day. And with a diverse
Hold on. I think you should repeat that one. I know you're out there. I know you're out there listening because you've come on consultations. You've been private clients. And I know many of us are creatures of habit. We could eat the same thing. And some of us think of ourselves as low maintenance because we can do that. But Reika, why is that not a good thing?
So if you're eating the same things over and over, so you're not rotating every 24 hours, you're presenting the same types of food to the bacteria, and you'll narrow the range of short chain fatty acids. And they found in studies, you can give people exogenous, so that means in capsule form, short chain fatty acids to facilitate weight loss. And so why not just eat a diverse diet to support weight loss? And that's a whole problem. So if you're eating and then you can also induce unintentional food sensitivities. So that's even bigger. Then all of a sudden you can't tolerate different foods, even the ones that are healthy.
So good. So important. Okay. So give us some example of, you've seen certain diets. Are there certain ones specifically that are worse as far as limiting short chain fatty acids?
Probably the worst out there is the carnivore diet. It's one food. So I'm not saying it doesn't have a role, but if I choose to put someone on that has an autoimmune condition for a short time, then I'm giving them exogenous or oral capsules that boost short chain fatty acids. I'm supporting them while they're having that on board. So I'm not a really big fan for the average person or anything that's beyond a month, maybe 2 or 3 to quiet things down. Probably followed by the other two that are tops is just even not being properly instructed when you're doing an elimination diet on the reintroduction of foods. So people get stuck. So someone innocently says, hey, you need to do this elimination diet. The Whole30s one, another popular one is the AIP or autoimmune paleo diet. And they're not guided on when to reintroduce. And I work with people one-on-one, and I've told them on how to reintroduce. You can tell people how to reintroduce, and it doesn't sink in because this is all a new language. But I can catch them on follow-up and say, hey, did you reintroduce those foods? Remember what I said? And there's occasionally one or two people every now and again that are like, no, I've been limiting. And they're at the 4 to 6 month mark, and you're like, you got to get all kinds of foods in your diet. So another thing I tell people is view the food as nourishing. So it's nourishing, it's abundant, it's diverse. One tip is I want your viewers to go home and write down what they eat every day and count up the number of different foods they eat in a week. And unfortunately, what do you think the average is, Deborah, in just general society?
Oh gosh, this is a great question. What a good quiz. Oh,
I'll tell you.
98.
Oh, 98 foods they eat in a week? Or the ones that don't eat a lot of foods?
The ones that do.
Oh, no, actually, most American adults eat the same 10 to 15 foods day in and day out. Yeah, it's really limited.
Oh my goodness.
And but then when you educate them, the goal is to get at least over 35, but then a real challenge would be to try to do more than 50 different foods in a week. So that would be a real challenge.
Okay. Awesome. So listeners, I'm giving you homework in the show notes, by the way. So that's why the pregnant pause. I'm having you count this week. I want you to do this. This is a great challenge for everybody. So awesome. Okay. Anything else? Any last tidbit that we need to know about short chain fatty acid?
Yeah, just like I said, just rotate the food every 24 hours. Try to eat a wide variety of foods throughout the week. Oh, one more, eating prebiotic foods, things like asparagus, leeks, and there's a whole list of them that I give my patients, can serve to fuel the bacteria and release that in abundance. And then, find a guide or a healthcare practitioner. If you've been on a restrictive diet, you may have trouble reintroducing, and there's strategies that we use to help you reintroduce those foods so you don't react.
So good. Super rich, Reika. Thank you so much. Okay. And you have a program. We've been teasing it the whole time about what's involved and what you offer that so many diet programs don't, and the maintenance, so we can keep it off, because that is the ultimate goal, right? We don't just want to lose it, but we want to keep it off. We're going to put that link to the program in the show notes. And if you've got a mind like a steel trap and you're commuting or walking, it's flipping50.com/she reset. And again, that'll be there. But Reika, where's the best place for listeners to find you on social media, follow you, and soak up some more of your goodness?
Yeah, so both on Facebook and Instagram, and it's just at Dr. Reika, or with the business pages /DRRAJKA. So that's the way you spell my name. And so and be on the lookout for TikTok. So I'm going to be dipping my toes in, hopefully by the time this airs, on TikTok.
So good. That's awesome. And you have a Facebook group. Is that private, open to the public?
Yeah, so I have a free Facebook group as well. And that is, and you can link that in the show notes. It's like weight, hormone, and energy balance for women. So we give people free tips within that group.
That is awesome. Okay, listeners, it is now up to you. So if there's a question that we prompted, or you've got something you wish I would have asked, it's your turn. You can leave it below the show notes. That'll be at flipping50.com/genetics of metabolism. And what are you waiting for? Let's start flipping 50 today.